This is one of the most powerful tools on LinkedIn. If a person does message you back, funny enough, you start being in their feed. This is my method. It's called RAPEET.
I'm here with Eddy. Eddy is a sales strategist and social selling advocate. We've been in touch a lot. He's helping us on various different levels, especially how we can place ourselves on LinkedIn. And I'm going to shoot you a few fire questions. So, happy to hear what you say about social selling.
I'm very, very excited.
Cool. So the first question is focusing on quantity or quality.
So I think, now if I had to choose one, it would definitely be quality. But as a salesperson that's been doing this for an immense amount of years, it's both. Truly, it is both, but it's the right level of quantity so that you can have the right level of quality. Now, if you look at, and this is a great example, if you get Sales Navigator with LinkedIn, right? We have right now in this day and age, a lot of people who are trying to build all these elaborate lists. And the problem is we're being too wide. We're not narrowing down properly. We're building really big lists, and the quality of the messaging itself, it kind of degrades. So ideally what you want to do is have the right quantity, try to narrow down as far as possible so that you can pivot your messaging in sync with that exact list. So instead of having a wide list of 1,000 people, try narrowing it down to about 100 or even 50 people. And ideally speaking, once that's done, your messaging can be very in sync with that specific list. And I was giving an example, I think it was 2 days ago, to somebody that I was helping coach, is let's say that you're narrowing your list down to somebody in SMB. In SMB right now, we know more than ever, especially with the economic climate that we're in, it's getting harder and harder for these companies to try and thrive. So you want to make sure that your messaging is in sync with what's currently happening and the hardships in which these companies are facing, right? So it will always be about the quantity of people, but also the quality of the messaging.
Good. Second question. What's the main benefit of social selling?
Oh, so there is tons of them. But one that I truly believe in is authority, is building authority in your market, building a reputation, creating trust in the most indirect way. With social selling, especially for somebody who's creating content and people are seeing you on a day-to-day basis or even every 2-3 days, you're continually building an authority for yourself and you're publishing this content that people can build trust in you. Now, I know this is going to be a question, so I'm going to address it. I'm going to semi-address it. When it comes to the sales cycle, and traditional sellers against social sellers is the complete reverse. And the reason is because you are building trust indirectly with people on the platform instead of having to build it in the sales cycle as you're speaking to your prospects / leads and clients and so forth. So the real benefit comes from the fact that you're being seen all the time and people understand the value that you bring to the table and they understand the problem that you're solving. And if there's anything we know about salespeople in general that we've been taught over the years is always try to identify pain and try to solve these pains. You're doing them and these people are seeing you do it day in and day out. They know that you're capable of solving that problem for them, which makes it easier for them to come to you. And it also makes the outreach easier when you go to them, especially if they've heard of you. Because at that point, it shortens your sales cycle, which again, I know we're going to be looking at soon. So that would be my answer.
Okay. I also had recently a chat with Tom Slocum, which you, I guess, know as well. And he also said building trust is very important. He has 2 methods around this, like the fetch method and the tap method. So basically first follow, engage, etc. And then try to see how you can help them in the first place to build further trust. Completely.
Very much so. I can touch on that in the question, which I'm sure we'll ask about the sales cycle.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to say completely d'accord with it, because it's my only French skills I have. But let's go for the next question. I know that you are super fluent in French. However, the next question, can social selling help cut the sales cycle?
It absolutely can. And I'll explain it this way. In traditional selling, a lot of the upfront efforts are going to be done with SDRs, BDRs, and so forth. A lot of the outreach is done with a multitude of different things. It could be with cold calls, it could be with emails, it could be DMs, text messages. Now, once you've established a booked meeting, then the sales cycle starts. This at which point where you're going to conduct your discovery, your demo, your alignment calls, your follow-ups, your proposals, and so forth. With social selling, it's the absolute reverse. What you don't see is the invisible. When you are publishing content, when you are commenting, when you are following your prospects, when you're commenting on their own posts, when you're DMing them or you're sharing resources continuously and they're seeing this, there's this invisible thing that you don't see, but your prospects are seeing, and they're called lurkers. These prospects are always seeing what you've been doing, and they're building trust in you as an individual, which they believe can actually contribute to their success. When the time comes and you do reach out to them, and let's say they've liked a post or they've commented on your post or they've looked at your profile, which this is one of the most powerful tools on LinkedIn, is who's viewed your profile. When you take the step forward and try to contact them, at this point, they've already seen what you're capable of doing, which means by the time that you actually book your meeting, there's a level of trust that's already established that you didn't have to actually go and try to do in your original traditional sales cycle. So now this is why the sales cycle tends to shorten very much. Because by the time you have your conversation, and I said this in a post before, a lot of the times you'll meet people and they'll use this line, I feel like I already know you. The reason this comes up is because they've been following your content. They've been following what you're doing, which makes it a lot easier to establish trust in said conversation, which is why you will close the deal faster, because there's something that they know about you that they don't know if it was somebody trying to spring up a conversation or a meeting. So yes, it definitely helps cut the sales cycle, but the only thing you don't see is that invisible. So when you have the short time span with your traditional sales and then the long sales cycle, it's the reverse in social. It's the long amount of trust being built that you don't see until you do shorten it within the deal. So this is why it does help to cut the sales cycle. It's just also the level of effort that you would shorten in comparison to your traditional sales.
I think nowadays it's also hard to not know you because you're quite present on LinkedIn. So I don't know if it's for everyone the same, but definitely I know what you're meaning. And saying for us, it's also, before we engage with someone, we tap into their feeds for 3 to 4 weeks just with our postings. And that's why the subconscious level, they may have seen a posting from me, so they may know me. And then we reach out after 4 weeks with a message, comment.
But this is exactly the best example.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So what's the best place then to start?
So I will give you, I love that you mentioned Tom Slocum and his method. So this is my method, and this is going back to really traditional sales and implementing more inside of social, but it's called RAPEET. So it's RAPEET. So the idea is you do research, analysis, planning, execution, evaluation, and transcription. So you could do this in all fronts, especially with LinkedIn. And the idea is that you want to, and this is apart from doing any branding work. So before you start branding yourself, before you start doing any content, the right way to do is try to make sure you do the right level of research. With LinkedIn, a lot of people don't really know the ins and outs or even some of the Boylan search tricks that you can use without even having Sales Navigator. There are a lot of tricks like using the big letter and, or, location. The research is fundamental. Once you get the right research in, you analyze that research, understand, like we had said in a previous call before, how many employees are truly in there, trying to understand some of their funding, trying to understand some of their hiring patterns. What are they doing for growth purposes? Who's doing content? What are they writing in that content? Who's commenting? Who's liking? What's their pattern look like? What's the behavior look like? And that comes part of the analysis. Once you have that analysis completed, you then want to start planning about your outreach. You want to understand how I'm going to go forward based on the specific segment, based on understanding what their behavior looks like. Once I have that planning completed, then you want to, of course, execute like any other salesperson would. Once you've executed, you evaluate it as any other salesperson would with specific metrics, right? With specific KPIs, and you follow what's exactly being done and how it's being done. And then you look at some of the responses, positive, negative. Are they clicking? Are they not clicking? Or is there right open rates for it, etc.? And once that's done and you have it, then you want to transcribe it for future purposes and then evolve it. That's why it's called RAPEET, so that you can continue to repeat it so it can be evolved, so that eventually you have a more seamless process moving forward.
Okay. Gotcha. And then you execution side. So you mix then also like social selling with traditional selling, meaning
absolutely. I would definitely always. LinkedIn does not work without the other forms of outreach. Okay. You can, it could depending on your reputation, but for myself, I could do a lot of it because I'd like to think I built the right amount of authority on the platform. But when it comes down to people who are not necessarily on the platform enough, there's a lot of CEOs and founders and VPs and director of sales who don't really utilize it often enough. So you have to multi-thread. And this is where I'm going to say it, and I'm just going to shoot it out there. But tools like Surfe help so much.
Okay.
Because then you can take that information that you have on the platform, and of course, I'm going to use it. So I can easily take that information and then bridge it over to my CRM, which at this point, I can start my multi-thread. Because if they're not necessarily on the platform, I could still take the data that I need using Surfe and then migrate it into my CRM, which makes it easier for me to utilize the other tools that I have in my arsenal, or call it in my toolbox, to be able to get it closer and closer towards the finish line.
Love that. Perfect pitch. I think
that was a flawless one, eh? That was flawless.
Definitely into Q4, into the next phase calls. So thanks a lot for that. And you're right. Also, I recently read, I think it was a poll on LinkedIn somewhere, that nowadays first still is cold calling for most people for outreach, because it's a hard process, and you, I don't know, have 50 dials, 4 connects, and then 1 meeting out of it. But still, it's the most kind of reliable source of getting meetings. Second was actually LinkedIn and social selling approach. And then the third was email, because often still for me, the second was email, but nowadays, I don't know how it's with your inbox. It's so much spam, and it's first message, like first approach to sell. But I think in LinkedIn, especially when you mix it, then you can build further trust. You can kind of connect. You have at least a picture. Then you can do a cold call. You hear voice, maybe a video in email then. So I think this is how you can build further trust, and this could then increase your chance to get a reply.
I'm in accord with that. And I think one of the reasons why with LinkedIn works so well is because you can put a face to the name. Exactly. And it goes back to even one of the formats of outreach is when you do actually send an email to your prospect as your first touch. I know that we've done this even in trainings. If you do your email as your first touch, and then you do your LinkedIn as your second, then you go into cold calling after, you use the first two as a semi-warm way to do the cold call, or use your first one as your semi-warm for your LinkedIn touch. In essence, to say, when you actually DM them after the email, telling them that you emailed them and saying, I wanted to put a face to the name, or this way you as a prospect can put a face to the name so that you know who you're actually speaking to. Now you've become a human and not necessarily potentially just a robot, right? Because they don't know if it's just a machine that's pumping all these things out or a sequence. But if you're actually doing the outreach, they'll see, oh, it's actually a person. I know the email me, I just didn't have time, or I was busy, or I didn't care too much, but I'll give this person the time of day. And especially if they start messaging you back, this is the cool thing about LinkedIn that most don't actually know. If a person does message you back, funny enough, you start being in their feed, which now gives that person the potential of seeing what you've been doing and seeing if you can potentially solve their problem, which gives them more reason to continue communicating with you. And this is what we had talked about before, right? I think this is where a lot of people don't.
Good. Last question. I think we arrived at the last question, which is,
yes.
How do we stay on track with all the different kind of social selling methods? I mean, we heard your method, we heard Tom's method. There's so much things that always come up new in social selling. How can we stay on track and not fall behind?
So there's 2 things. The first one is make sure that you are continually learning from people both in the field, and what I mean is social sellers that are continually giving you information on the platform. Make sure that you do get coaching. This is very crucial. Take the time to actually get coaching or consulting from people such as myself. And I'm not trying to plug myself, but just in general, get coaching from people who know the trade, who understand how to do this. And second, utilize tools. Tools are crucial. I'm going to plug it again, but using tools like Surfe is crucial to understanding and how to not fall behind. Now, the way that I use it, when and if, let's say you are using the tool, and you're continuously putting people in your pipeline, the best part about it to not fall behind is it's in your pipeline. Now, if you're not using tools and you're just having conversations in your DMs and you're not using something to migrate it into your pipeline, you can't follow it. And a lot of people that I've spoken to have a very hard time with inbox and LinkedIn. I have a trick, which I'm not going to share today, but nonetheless, it's a basic trick to at least try and stay in touch with, try to stay on track, but you still need tools like Surfe. Without them, it'll be very difficult to follow your prospects, follow what you need to do next, create your follow-ups, your touches, your tasks, and etc. So those are definitely 2 things. Follow the people that are doing it properly, reach out to them, get consultations, get coaching. The second is utilize tools properly, like your Surfe, and make sure that you're always putting in the right data in the right places so that you can create your next steps.
I know I can definitely kind of recommend everyone from small to big who wants to start, or I think start is the wrong word, because everyone who does multi-sequencing should include LinkedIn. And if you want to start social selling, then get sure you follow or reach out to Eddy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
You're not helping us.
Pleasure as always.
I know that you're also helping kind of Chili Piper and the likes, and they have very compelling social selling strategies. I know that's a big part of their lead gen is based on that. So
big time.
Yeah, no, thanks for having
big time.
me.
I'm also working on something pretty big, but excited for that to come out soon.
Super cool. So then get sure to follow Eddy, to follow what's coming next then. And thanks a lot for having a chat as always. And
thank you so much for having me, Dave.
Participation also in the ebook.
Always. Thank you so much.
So, yeah. Thank you.
Have a great day. Have a great day, guys.